sold Joseph as a slave to some Egyptians. And Joseph disappeared, and then Jacob, their father, was like horrified as, where's my favorite son? We don't know. But in fact, they sold him. Or they said he's dead. He was killed by bandits. But in fact, he was sold to the Egyptians. So he went to work there, and the Pharaoh, which was the king of Egypt at that time, was looking for helpers, and Joseph found a job inside Pharaoh's temple.
You missed some details.
So help me.
Yes, Jacob actually, when he died, they put smeared sheep's blood all over his technical dream coat and gave that to his dad to say like, hey, he died. Here's the bloody coat saying, hey, your son's dead.
Technicolor dream coat.
Joseph had a very fancy coat, and they smeared lamb's blood on it so that they could show Jacob that Joseph was dead.
And then Joseph originally started in the prisons, but because he was so good at interpreting dreams, he eventually had to go interpret a dream for the Pharaoh, saying that that Egypt was going to go through like years of hell, and that's how he got freed and then became an advisor to Pharaoh.
Oh, that's cool.
Take that, Danny!
She won. That's very true. I skipped details there. So yes. Joseph was in prison, and there was a drought. So back home in Canaan, there was no food. So they started. What?
I just told them it's very hot. He's about to burn
I should fast forward. It's a long, complicated story. We need hours.
You committed to it. I started with Moses. You started with Abraham.
Okay, so Joseph ended up in prison in Egypt, and Pharaoh had a series of terrible dreams. Tell us the dreams.
That I forget.
Okay, well there was one dream. I can't remember what the dreams were, but in fact Joseph was able to interpret the dreams correctly, and he said there was going to be 7 years of great crops and then 7 years of drought. So he told Pharaoh that you should, during the 7 years of great times, you should start conserving food, because after those 7 years, there's going to be a great drought. And Pharaoh believed him, and they started hoarding all the food. And then came the drought, and everybody from all over,
drought.
Yeah,
drought.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody from all over were heading to Egypt because they were the only one that had food, including Jacob and his 12 sons. The 12 sons came begging for food, and they didn't recognize that Joseph was the right-hand man of the king. So Joseph put him through some shit, but then he says, hey, it's me, Joseph, you sold me.
I remember what the bank was.
Wow.
So after Jacob was the second youngest son. So the youngest son, he planted like a cup. Yeah, Benjamin. They planted like a very fancy cup in his bag or something, and then Joseph was like, Who stole my cup? Who stole my cup? And then they find him in Benjamin's bag, they throw him in prison. The oldest brother says, no, take me instead. He's too good, he's too innocent, take me instead.
Basically, Joseph was fucking around with him.
Yeah, and then they start begging him, and then he's like, guys, I'm your brother. Do you not recognize me? Pulling a prank.
Yes, at this point, Jacob was very old, 100 years old, so that they couldn't believe that his father was actually still alive. So in any case, they invited the family to all live in Egypt, and they flourished and they were doing well. But then the Pharaoh died, and they started turning against the Jews. After Jacob and the brothers came, they came with a camp of 70. But after a series of years, they kept multiplying, and there was a new Pharaoh. And Jews do. Everyone is having a lot of kids, and suddenly they started thinking that the Jews were going to overthrow the Pharaoh. So they're going to outnumber us because they're having so many kids. So they enslaved them.
Jews will not replace us.
So during that time, somebody had a kid named Moses. And he was like, that is where Moses shows up. Okay?
Yeah, that's the name I recognize.
Yeah, so they were stuck in they were stuck in as slaves for 400 years in Egypt. And that they could have constructed. If this story is actually true, then they could have, because nobody knows if these are fables or actually this happened, because there's no archaeological evidence.
It's a metaphor.
There's no archaeological
Daniel,
evidence?
I don't think so. Going
Daniel,
back that
we're
far.
gonna edit that part out.
Okay.
Glass.
Why?
Well, you don't want anybody on camera saying we haven't proven that
No, I
the
mean,
Jews were persecuted.
well, they say that-
alone will get you cancelled for
All
life.
three Judaic,
Twitter is the free
Judaic
speech
Muslim
platform.
religions believe in Abraham and Isaac. Then the split came with Jacob, because I think that what? The split came. The Arabs and the Muslims are all coming from Abraham, not Isaac. So Abraham had 2 kids, Isaac and Esau. And anyhow, that's a different story. So Moses showed up 400 years later. How did he get? He was working. Oh, the Pharaoh has.
In the Nile.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you how the story of Moses. So there was a slave girl who was working for the Pharaoh's daughter, and she was Jewish, and she got pregnant, and she had a son, Moses. But they were killing the kids at that point. You know, they were really like only keeping the young women and killing the kids and killing the men. And so she didn't want her kids to die. So she put it in the river, in the Nile, at the last resort. And then Pharaoh's daughter found him.
After he floated down the river.
Floated down the
One
river.
thing that's important to know about Passover Seder's is that just like there was an interminably long time, horrible experience for the Jews in Egypt,
We try to make it horrible.
we try to
for
make
everyone.
the telling of the story as long and horrible
Also,
as possible.
I see that now.
most people get to survive, but in denial, you know.
In denial.
In denial. Okay, so they found Moses. He was raised up in the royal family. Nobody knew he was Jewish. He was raised up in the Pharaoh's house. And eventually,
Again, this was also the first time in history someone said, "Funny, you don't look Jewish."
how did it happen? He burnt his tongue, so Moses had a lisp. Because
It was like a test of loyalty, like no, there were 2 sons, and it was a test to see like who was better or something.
no,
Yeah.
it was.
You guys invented reality TV. This is incredible.
I'm trying to remember the story.
All the little details.
They were suspecting Moses of being Jewish, so the Pharaoh.
Because you were circumcised.
There was a plot to assassinate someone.
This is way early. This is when Moses is a baby. So they put in
That
front
only
of.
happens in season
They
2.
put so Pharaoh wanted to see if he was a threat to the kingdom. So they put like gold in front of him, and they put a burning coal in front of him as a kid. They wanted to see if he'd know to choose the gold. So he was about to go for the gold, and then theoretically God moved his hand and he took the coal and put it in his mouth, you know, and so he had a lisp. So Moses always had a lisp. In any case,
He didn't go for the gold. He didn't go for the gold because he wasn't. Wait, it's not a Jews going
So
for the gold.
technically,
God put
his name was Moses.
his name was Moses. His name was Moses. So, Julie, you want to help me?
What part were you at?
Okay, we're at Moses getting the lift. In any case, he grew up, he became a helper in Pharaoh's house, and he also became the representative for the Jews. And Pharaoh was becoming like harder and harder and harder than the Jews and really killing a lot of them, whoever wasn't prepared to work. And Moses organized a revolution pretty much, and so he had God on his side, so God came down and says, get the people out. So Moses went to Pharaoh and says, God told me to get the people out, so we're ready to leave.
Let my people free.
Let my people go. So Pharaoh said, let me think about it. And he came back and said, no, they're not letting leave. So he said, God's got to give you a sign, and then you're going to have to let us leave. So the first sign was because this is the 10 plagues. Have you heard of the plagues? Okay, so the first plague was
Lack of Wi-Fi.
lack of Wi-Fi. First plague was blood. So he turned all the water into blood. So people dumps for day. Second plague was frogs. So there were like a frog infested dumps or
I told you so.
Then boils. Then there's a series that there was like locusts. There were all the livestock were dying.
They had Arab immigrants. They had all of those.
It get progressively worse. Then there was darkness, so like you couldn't see. There was like there was hail.
Plague was Danny
And
telling
then
the
he took the
story.
first sons or something like that, right?
The last one,
That's
the last one, finally, and Pharaoh says, I'm not letting you go. So then finally, the last one was the death of the firstborn. So that's where you have Jewish homes, a mezuzah, you know?
Yeah,
So,
we kiss it every time we go.
yeah, but so at that point, this was the invention of the mezuzah, as they told, like Moses said, all the Jews, take some lamb's blood and put it on the side of your doorway, so that God knows not to kill your firstborn.
So Passover.
That's how you got the name Passover, because you pass over the house with those signs.
There you have it! There you have it!
I'm remembering this as I'm telling you.
Finally.
In any case, so that was the last one. Finally, Pharaoh lost his cool and said that was the 10th plague. He said, okay, you have like 12 hours to get out. So don't take anything with you, just go. So that's why you have this unleavened bread, because they didn't even have chance to bake. They had to take it like anything that was only like an hour, will just take your stuff and go. So they didn't have time for the bread to rise. So that's how the matzah became part of the tradition. And then they ran to the Red Sea because they used gluten. They ran to the Red Sea,
The matzah was real.
and their 12 hours was up. Okay, I'm almost at the end. They ran to the Red Sea, and the 12 hours were up. So Pharaoh sent all his army to try and bring them back, and they were stuck at the sea. So God split the sea, and then the Jews crossed the sea, and then the army went to chase them. As soon as the Jews were out, they were all engulfed in there. And that's the story of Passover. And then they extended up in the desert for 40 years, which was really no more than a 60-hour walk if they had
It's a
GPS.
60-hour
They
walk.
just didn't have a GPS.
No
They're
GPS,
terrible with everything.
no drones. And that, my friend, is the story of Passover.
Alright.
I thought at the end of the 12 hours
A long
How many
version.
minutes was it?
That's 10 minutes.
Not too bad.
Hey, you said under 15.
I could have
11.
stretched it and stretched it.
Actually, it was 11. 11.
back into a pumpkin.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you for that lovely explanation of Passover.